Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to dive deep and trace the absolutely epic, deeply emotional saga of Joel, Ellie, and Abby. We're also going to untangle that somewhat complex web of remasters, remakes, and television adaptations that make up the whole The Last of Us universe. Created by Naughty Dog and first hitting our screens back in 2013, this franchise literally redefined cinematic storytelling in interactive media. So, whether you're trying to make sense of the release timeline, figuring out how the HBO series maps to the games, or you just want to relive the complete story of one of the greatest narratives ever told, you are in the exact right place. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's just quickly map out our journey to make sure we don't get lost in the infected wasteland. We are covering the initial outbreak, Joel and Ellie's cross-country journey, that devastating choice at the climax, the brutal cycle of revenge in part 2, and finally, how this whole universe grew into a massive transmedia empire. All right, part 1, the outbreak and survival. Let's start right at the beginning. Everything here kicks off with a terrifying biological event that completely strips away civilization and, honestly, our protagonist's neural compasses along with it. And it's absolutely crucial to understand the threat here. This is not your typical run-of-the-mill zombie virus. It's a horrific, mutated Cordyceps fungus. According to creators Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley, the idea actually sparked from a BBC Nature documentary, Planet Earth, which showed a real-world fungus infecting insects. In this story, the fungus mutates to infect humans. It takes over their brains and turns them into these aggressive cannibalistic hosts. It's what makes the horror feel so incredibly grounded in a terrifying biological reality. Now, the narrative itself spans decades. In the year 2003, or 2013 if we're going by the original game's timeline, a man named Joel tragically loses his daughter Sarah, right in his arms during the chaotic initial hours of the outbreak. This loss completely shatters him. Fast forward 20 years later to a quarantined Boston, and Joel is now a hardened, totally ruthless smuggler. He and his partner Tess get tasked by a rebel militia called the Fireflies to transport a 14-year-old girl named Ellie. The catch? Ellie is somehow immune to the Cordyceps. And if you really want to understand her intense survivor's guilt, we have to look at the Left Behind expansion. This is set just 3 weeks prior, where Ellie and her best friend Riley are both bitten, but only Riley turns. So Ellie is left alive carrying the profound, crushing weight of that survival. Moving on to part 2, a journey across America. As Joel and Ellie head out on this incredibly perilous escort mission to get her to a Firefly lab, they literally encounter the best and the absolute worst of what remains of humanity. Their cross-country truck is grueling, guys. From the fatal sacrifice of Joel's partner Tess early on, to navigating a totally booby-trapped town run by a paranoid survivalist named Bill, the danger is just constant. The tragedies pile up, right? Like the heart-wrenching loss of 2 young brothers, Henry and Sam in Pittsburgh. But through it all, finding a brief spark of hope at Tommy's settlement in Wyoming and surviving a truly terrifying winter encounter with cannibalistic hunters led by David, a profound shift happens. Through this shared trauma, Joel's frozen heart slowly thaws out, and he really begins to see Ellie as a daughter. Which brings us to part 3, the devastating choice. All of this trauma brings us to the climax of the first story. They finally reach the Fireflies in Salt Lake City, but the reality of the cure changes absolutely everything. This situation is impossibly grim. The Fireflies realize that to synthesize a vaccine, they have to remove the infected portion of Ellie's brain. The surgery will kill her. Full stop. Joel, who has finally allowed himself to love a child again after losing Sarah, simply refuses to let Ellie die. He goes on this violent, desperate rampage through the hospital, ultimately killing the lead surgeon, Jerry Anderson. He rescues an unconscious Ellie and takes her to safety. And then, he commits the ultimate betrayal of trust. He lies to her. He looks her in the eye and tells her the Fireflies found other immune people, that a cure was impossible, and they had just given up. Basically, he prioritizes his love for Ellie over the potential salvation of all humanity. And when Ellie eventually wakes up and questions him, Joel swears to her that his lie about the Fireflies is the absolute truth. Ellie looks right at him and simply replies with this single devastating word: "Okay." It's such an incredibly heavy, ambiguous moment that caps off a masterpiece of emotional storytelling. Like, does she believe him? Does she know he's lying and just accepts it anyway? It leaves you completely reeling. And that heavy ending drops us right into part 4, the cycle of revenge. See, Joel's choice has monumental consequences. You just can't violently end the world's only hope for a cure and expect no repercussions, right? The thematic core of the story shifts dramatically in the sequel. As creator Neil Druckmann notes,
The first part is essentially exploring the extreme lengths a parent will go to for love. The sequel, on the other hand, completely flips the script. It dives into the dark depths of retribution. It asks, how far would you go to bring justice for those you love? It's a mirror image, moving from love-driven protection straight into trauma-driven destruction.
4 years after the hospital massacre, the past catches up. Abby, who, remember, is the daughter of the surgeon Joel killed, tracks Joel down and brutally murders him while a helpless Ellie is first to watch. This trauma totally shatters Ellie's peaceful life in Jackson. It sends her on a relentless 3-day killing spree through Seattle, hunting down Abby's friends and a militia called the WLF. Now, in a really bold stroke of transgressive storytelling, the game actually forces the player to switch perspectives halfway through and play as Abby for 3 days. It creates this deeply uncomfortable but super powerful empathy. Months later, Ellie is seemingly at peace, living on a farm with her partner Dina, but her PTSD drives her to track Abby down one last time to Santa Barbara. In a final desperate showdown, Ellie actually overpowers Abby, but at the very last second, she has a change of heart and lets her live. Ellie returns to an empty farmhouse, realizing she's lost pretty much everything to her pursuit of revenge. Finally, let's look at Part 5, a transmedia empire. So, what started as a single PS3 game has evolved into a multi-billion-dollar juggernaut. But with so many versions out there, it can be pretty confusing for newcomers trying to jump in. If you've ever wondered why Part 1 came out 2 years after a Part 2, this timeline clears it up perfectly. The original game launched on PS3 in 2013. In 2014, we got the Left Behind expansion and a PS4 remaster. Then, in 2020, the massive sequel, Part 2, hit shelves. 2 years later, in 2022, Sony released The Last of Us Part 1. And just to be super clear, Part 1 is simply a ground-up remake of the original 2013 game, built specifically for the PS5, just adding better graphics and animations to match the sequel. And all of this, of course, culminated in the massive 2023 HBO series. For those of you following the phenomenal Emmy-winning HBO adaptation starring Pedro Pascal as Joel and Bella Ramsey as Ellie, here's exactly how the interactive narrative maps over to the television show. Season 1 flawlessly adapted the entire first game along with the Left Behind DLC. Now, because Part 2 is such a massive, sprawling narrative, the game cost around $220 million to develop, showrunners Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann have confirmed they are splitting it up. Season 2 will cover the first half of Part 2, and Season 3 is set to conclude Abby and Ellie's really dark journey. To say this story resonated would be a massive understatement. The franchise has sold over 40 million units globally. It's grossed over $1 billion. It spawned comic books, a tabletop game, and one of HBO's most successful series ever. It is absolute proof that emotionally complex, character-driven narratives that just don't shy away from dark, morally gray themes are incredibly successful. So, to wrap up this explainer, having traced this entire story from the very first horrifying moments of the Cordyceps outbreak all the way to Ellie's final hollow victory in Santa Barbara, we leave you to ponder the ultimate moral dilemma of the entire franchise. Knowing the cycle of violence it unleashes, what would you have done in that hospital room? Would you save the world, or would you save the one person who means the world to you? Think about it. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep exploring these incredible stories.